I'll just project. It says it's on, but I don't know how to actually work technology right now. So yeah, thank you for having me. Shannon said I'm very articulate. I will start with, I'm still learning to English again, so forgive me if I sound a little awkward. So I have a PowerPoint today. There's a little bit of information about my professional career leading up to the Peace Corps, and then there's tons of pictures, because that's what we all love, right? So thank you for that great introduction, Shannon. You're, of course, an awesome person. There we go. Oh. So my journey. I got my Bachelor's of Social Work here in 2010. It was the time when you still needed to be a full-time student to be on your parents' insurance, so I went straight into my master's degree. Did the advanced standing, the one-year program. If you're doing your bachelor's degree, it's a nice option. It's a stressful option, I won't lie. You're doing a pretty heavy caseload of courses on top of an internship. But it was a really exciting experience for me at the University of Utah. I was in the public services track, which you focus on gaining clinical skills, but you also are able to learn more about policy and macro side of things, not just the clinical work side of things, which I loved. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do after grad school, so it was this great opportunity to get various skills through my education. I also got a substance abuse treatment certificate during my master's degree, and interned with boys and girls on an outpatient basis, adolescents who were struggling with substance abuse and mental health concerns. That's me at my master's graduation. It's a fun time. So after master's degree, when I was looking for work, the places hiring CSWs, which is what you are when you first leave your master's program and pass the clinical exam with the ASWB, they were all hospice work. And I had a dad who was struggling with a terminal cancer, and I was like, no, that's not the life for me. So I found work in a treatment center instead. I started as a staff, which is a bachelor's level position. And I told the HR, I told people, I was like, I want to be a therapist here. I have my master's degree. I'm a CSW. Eventually, that's my goal. And please consider me when positions open up here. But I started as a staff, and it was actually a really good experience for me. I worked with adolescents with mental health and behavioral needs that resulted from the mental health, a lot of trauma work and attachment work. So I was a staff for 6 months, and then a therapist spot opened up, and I was interviewed, and a week later I started as a therapist there. So it was a very quick transition. When I first started, it was quite the process of learning how to work within the agency. Worked a little bit longer hours at first, but really loved it. So I worked with mostly girls, but I had a caseload that included boys too. Everything from adolescents on the behavioral units to adolescents with sexual misconduct issues on the sexual misconduct unit to adolescents who had diagnosis of autism spectrum disorders on the autism units. So I got a varied experience with adolescents, and I really love the adolescent side of social work. Some people enjoy adults, some people enjoy working with the younger children, but I love the adolescents. You can be a little sassy with them because they're a little sassy. They're a little stubborn at first, and you have to break down that wall and kind of really work hard with them to build that rapport. But then when you get there, the potential for growth, their potential is just so amazing to see. Seeing the adolescents work through things was a beautiful experience. So I did that for a while, and I actually, in the middle of that 3 years and 6 months, took on the promotion for the clinical program administrator, which is a big fancy title for basically a program manager that does everything and anything. So during that time, I oversaw, I was supervisor to 80 staff in the facility, and the program manager over 100 residents treatments out of 150 kids in the facility. I oversaw the therapists who had children on my units. I helped with everything and anything that you could imagine. And it was a crazy job. It was a great experience for a year and a half, and I learned many things. But it was a very tiring experience. And I thought back once to how Shannon had told us in one of our undergraduate classes, when you get a master's, they're going to push you to be in a management level job. And I was like, this is exactly what he talked about. And now here I am, missing therapy. But I got to do some cool things. So this picture is actually me when I was a program manager. Part of my role, since we worked with out-of-state students, was to go to other states and provide a training to our partners. And this was one of the trainings where I went and talked to partners about trauma stewardship, which is caring for yourself while you work with those who have trauma. And it was a very exciting experience for me. This encounter was in Alaska. It was my first experience talking to more than 150 people at once. I was a little scared when I stepped out there, but it was something I was passionate about. And it became such a fulfilling and fun part of program management that whenever they were like, we need someone to go out to North Dakota, I'd be like, oh, it's cold, but I'll go. Send me, take me. So I really loved that side of my program management work, and it taught me very valuable skills. But I got tired. It was hard work. So after a year and a half of that, I went to my boss and I said, Becca, I'm demoting myself. I just need to do therapy again. I miss the interactions. I miss that clinical side of work. I miss not having to run around and be in meetings all the time. I just want to hang out with the kids again. Let me be a therapist again. And luckily, I worked for a very great supervisor, and she said, yes, we want you to stay here with us. So I was able to transition back into therapy. I gained my LCSW in 2014. So I don't know if you've looked much into that process after your master's degree. You can wait to take the exam, or you can take it right away. Take it right away. Because once you start practicing how you do things in practice versus the theory side of it sometimes conflicts. So take that exam right away and then work on your hours. It's usually a 2-year process. You have to get a certain number of hours direct clinical work and then a certain number of CSW. And I loved it. I loved the supervisor I had. She was a great woman. And to this day, we still are in contact and still is a mentor to me, even though she's retired. And after a couple of years, you can become supervisors to new CSWs, which is a fun part too. You get to be that one that helps them shape their therapeutic skills, and I loved that side. Got to do that with a couple of our therapists. So Copper Hills with this great experience, 6 years basically experience, and really this opportunity where I got to practice all of these skills from my bachelor's degree, all of these skills from my master's degree, and really get exposed to just how much is out there in the world of social work. And I had really hard days and really beautiful days. And the dream catcher up at the top, one of my clients' grandmothers made it for me and mailed it to me at Christmas time. And she was an indigenous person, and her grandmother said, this is a depiction of a man, and he has been on a long journey, and he's slumped over, and he's tired, but he's at the end of his journey, and he's made it there successfully. And she said to me, that is what you have done for my granddaughter. She has been in 5 treatment centers before here, and other people have struggled to help her get to where she is, but she's there. She's at the end of her journey, and she's coming home. And it's a beautiful experience to have. Social work is tough, right? There's the hard days, and nothing goes as planned, but there's really beautiful experiences like that. I'm also trained in a bunch of stuff, different kinds of therapies out there. I definitely recommend trying new things in your CEUs, getting trained in things when you're given the opportunity. It gives you such an experience. So that was my professional life. So then I moved into, beyond work. Outside of work, before I started the Peace Corps, I was a volunteer mentor in Salt Lake City for a program that does local and international service with adolescents and young adults. So during the school year, they're working on local service and understanding the needs of their community. And they're planning each month projects. The organization partners with Rotary clubs or other organizations in different countries about what projects they're interested in that realistically our team can do. So we plan these projects in state. They develop leadership skills in these projects. And then in the summer, after their school year has ended, they go internationally and they get to do some of these projects and really learn how to implement things, work within a culture. But it's very short-term work. It's like 3 weeks is all. So it's very high impact, but short-term. And that really was fun, but I wanted something longer term. You know, and a lot of us do AmeriCorps for our practicum in our bachelor's degree, and they talk to you a little bit about Peace Corps. And Peace Corps is long-term. It's 27 months, right? So it's this long-term experience that I was like, I want to get there eventually. And I hadn't gone into it after undergrad for personal reasons with my father and his cancer. I didn't want to be away if he passed away. So I actually didn't go into it until later in my life, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. So some of these pictures, we're here in Kenya, and these women have taken sewing classes from some of our different adolescents and young adults who could teach sewing. Here we were collecting education supplies to donate to schools for Nepal that year. This year was in Cambodia, playing games, getting active, and in Guatemala, helping them do a garden. Great experiences, great opportunities to work with people and understand different cultures, but short term. So I moved into the process of applying for Peace Corps. We knew our dad was going to pass away. Work was at a hard point for me. I was reaching that burnout part at my job. There was lots of factors that influenced it, and I knew when my dad passed away, I wouldn't be mentally in a spot to keep doing the high-intensity work I was doing. So I applied for Peace Corps while I was still working, because it takes anywhere between 6 to 12 months. I would say the average is about 9 months for your application process, because you submit an application and an essay and your resume, and then you interview, and then they kind of debate and contemplate where's the best place for you, and then they invite you to serve, and then you have to do legal and medical clearance, and that's a big process. So it's this long process, and so from the time I applied to the time I left was almost a full year. It was about 11 months. But I knew I wanted to do this deeper work, this long-term work, and another culture, and really understand their experiences, their challenges, their growth, their successes from that deeper level than you can get from a 3-week experience, or some of these other programs that do 4 weeks or 6 weeks. I knew I wanted to really immerse in a culture and learn as much as I could about it. There's no way to learn everything about it, but to really learn about it. And I knew I wanted to do something that matched my skills. So when I applied, nowadays when you apply for Peace Corps, you can search by country, you can search by job, you kind of have some choice. Back in the early 2000s, you just applied and they said, here's where you're needed, here's what you're going to do. But when I applied, I looked for certain work. I wanted to do youth development work. I love the adolescent population. It's my favorite. I wanted to work with something that I knew I had the skills to do. I didn't want to go to some country and be an agriculture volunteer. I can't tell you how to plant anything. But I was able to find a few positions, and I applied for those, and they interviewed me, and they said, which they'll say in every interview, if there's a place that we need you more, are you willing to go somewhere else? And I said, of course. It's the work I'm interested in. So I was invited to serve in the Philippines, which is quite the country. If you don't know, it has 7,000 islands with over 100 different languages and just as many different cultures within the different islands of the Philippines. So what's it like? What's the Peace Corps like? Because you're all interested in possibly that side of it too. It's hard, right? The Peace Corps slogan is, it's the toughest job you'll ever love. And I wholeheartedly believe that because you're living in another culture, and cultures have differences that are sometimes really challenging to get used to. A lot of the cultures and countries that Peace Corps serves in, there's been a history of colonization. There's a certain perspective of what Americans and white people are. So you're having to combat some big cultural differences based on colonization. And it's really beautiful at the same time. In our last reporting form that we did as volunteers, they asked us the question, how would you describe your Peace Corps service? And I'll point out a picture later on, but I said Peace Corps to me is like mosaic art. You have all these different pieces, and some of them are really jagged, and some of them are smooth, and they're all different colors and all different shapes and sizes. And they all have to come together. The challenges and the good sides of Peace Corps all have to come together to create this end piece, this end beautiful mosaic art. So you have challenges when you do it. The Philippines is a very extroverted, very collectivist, very personally connected culture. It was very common when you met someone, they'd ask your name. The second question they'd ask you is, are you married? Or do you want to date? And that's not normal, right? For us here in the US, we ask a few other questions before we jump right into those. But it's normal there. And that's part of who they are. And I'm very much an introvert for the most part. And so that was a big adjustment. You have adjustments like physical adjustments. It is hot and humid in the Philippines. The lowest temperature I ever experienced was 68 degrees, and that was with humidity. So imagine, moving from Utah, where we have these winters that are insanely long and cold, to the Philippines, where it's insanely hot all the time. There's no air conditioning. Sometimes there's not even electricity because there's outages, and you're sitting there in what's essentially 120-degree heat, fanning yourself with a hand fan. So it's an adjustment physically. You have to learn a language usually to be successful in a country, which I had never done before. I was never a person who had learned another language, and that was an adjustment. But I tell you, when you learn that language, the doors it opens in your service, it's beautiful. I was lucky to be in a rural community where I had no choice. You learn it or you basically don't survive in any way. They don't know enough English for you to not learn the language. And it was a great experience. I'm what they call advanced high proficiency Tagalog, which is a pretty good fluency in it. And most people achieve like advanced low in my batch, and I was able to get up to advanced high because I was so rural. There's volunteers who were placed in cities, and those ones had the most struggle learning the language, right? Cities, especially in a country where English is a common language, you get a lot more exposure to the English side of it, but I was able to learn the language. So Peace Corps in most countries is set up very similarly. You start with a form of training. You have a group of volunteers you come in with. In some countries they call it a group, in some countries they call it a batch, so mine is a batch. Ours had about 67 volunteers. We were broken into different clusters of work: youth development, education, and coastal resource management, which is environmental work. And part of the training is community-based. You live with a host family. You begin to understand what it's like to work within the community, within the culture. You're practicing and learning language. You're doing 4 hours of language class a day sometimes, which is really exhausting. And you get to have experiences that are great. So because I was a youth development worker, we got to work with a group of youth leaders in our community-based training. And they are youth that come from families that receive government assistance, families that have more difficulty financially. And our goal was to work with them and mentor them into being leaders in service in their community, because part of their scholarship for college is that they have to do something in their community. And it was a beautiful experience. This poem is one of our girls' poems that we worked with, one of our youth. And she actually translated it back into Tagalog for us for when we swore in at the embassy. And we read it in Tagalog. But it's a very beautiful poem. In case you can't see it, I'll read it. It is very far, yet achievable. It is very far, yet attainable. Something that is full of something unbelievable. And a star in the morning that's not impossible. And we build something. Love, happiness, and a helping hand. Community, freedom, and most of all, a home. So in our last week with the youth leaders, we had asked them to create art or poetry or something that expressed their experience. And that was her poem, and her picture is above. And to this day, I still talk to her. Before I left the Philippines, I went and visited the youth we worked with in our community training, because they are still very near and dear to my heart. So after you do your community training, each country's training looks a little different. You go to your site for 2 years, and you are assigned to a site that's fit for your skills, your needs, what your program managers see as a good fit for you, and you work for 2 years alongside a counterpart, a host country national. So for me, it was a Filipino social worker I worked with. And you help them achieve the goals that they have for why they requested a volunteer. These agencies have requested a volunteer. They want someone to come in and do certain things at their agency. And so I worked with my counterpart and had a great experience. I was placed in Oriental Mindoro. So the Philippines is the blue, and where I was placed was in the pink, and I was placed about halfway down on the pink island. And I was placed in what's called a residential rehabilitation center for children in conflict with the law. So we had, at any time, up to 29 boys in age range from 9 to 21 with active current cases with the court system in the Philippines. So we had boys whose cases ranged from things like theft and arson and drug use, all the way up to boys whose cases ranged from rape, sexual assault, and homicide. Which is serious, right? This is not easy work. It's very much like the social work experience you can get, and very powerful. So my goals that they wanted me to help them achieve was establish structure at the center for the boys to have educational and therapeutic gains, train staff in therapeutic interventions with the boys, and provide any other consultations as needed. So I went in with these 3 goals that I was going to help with. And I got to the center, and the boys had no structure. They played basketball, watched TV, and slept all day long. That's what they were doing. So I was like, wow, this is a place to start. There's nothing. All right, my work's cut out for me. Let's do assessments with staff. Let's do assessments with the boys, find out what they want to learn, find out what the staff wants for the center, start building a plan. And I worked hand in hand with my counterpart. I never did anything without planning it out with her because she knew what would work there. She had the understanding as a Filipina of what would work in my community. And we built a beautiful structure for the center together that involved me helping with a 1-hour session each day with the boys, but also other staff doing structure with the boys. And it was great. And I got to mentor boys and build relationships with them and have very moving experiences where they trusted me with very personal information, such as if they were feeling suicidal. And I got to train staff in how do we handle that when a boy comes to us and tells us he's feeling suicidal, especially in a culture where talking about those things is kind of uncomfortable. And they laugh it off and they're like, oh, let's not talk about that. And it was beautiful to see the growth in the staff and the boys and to see them be invested in this, to see the changes that built the capacity of the staff, that gave the boys skills and knowledge, so that when I left, it would still continue. It wasn't projects to boost me up or make me look good. It was projects to build the skills within them to continue. Whether it's as staff, continue providing great service to the youth they work with, or whether as boys, the skills to continue and move forward with a very positive life despite their challenges. So I loved it. So the Philippines is a very beautiful place. This is my sector and our staff. They're fun people. There's lots of different landscapes in the Philippines. This is my counterpart. And social workers here in the States, we don't always get paid a lot. We do a really hard job that sometimes people don't always understand, and it's very similar for social workers in the Philippines. And she is a woman I very highly admire for the hard work she does in providing the best care for those boys that she can. On the bottom picture is my host nanay, my host mother, and I had a birthday party. Birthdays are huge in the Philippines. They're a big event. Especially as you get older, they are a very big celebration with special dances and special costumes. And obviously, I was still adjusting to the temperature there. Couldn't put me in a dress. As part of my Peace Corps experience, I worked with the grants committee. I was able to help review and edit grants of current serving volunteers that they were submitting to help with projects in their communities. And those grants, of course, required the community to contribute 25% of the funding so that it's sustainable, of course. But it was a great experience. I got to know a few other volunteers selected to be on that committee on a more personal level and got to have that really fun experience while also helping fellow volunteers with something that's not easy. Grants are a hard process. This was an experience where I helped with a training for alternative learning system educators, creative ways to engage out-of-school youth or adult learners. And during that training was a showcase of cultural differences that exist even in the Philippines. And they were separated into groups that included people from one culture and another culture. So this was the cultural demonstration of one of the groups. And they have people from Mindanao, which is a predominantly Muslim region in the Philippines, as well as people from the mountain region, where the indigenous practices are still very alive and well, and very special. So it was really exciting to see the different cultural experiences and work with these adults, because adult work is fun sometimes for me, to get to train them in things I do that engage youth in learning, because social workers engage our youth in learning new skills, even if it's not educational, right? And it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. This thing is so slow. Okay. Pictures of boys, of course, for confidentiality. I don't show faces. Confidentiality isn't as big in the Philippines. It's actually really normal for people to showcase faces of their youth. But for me and my counterpart, we believe very much in protecting their confidentiality. So mentoring, school help. Some of our boys graduated from the alternative learning system education, which is like getting your GED. And then they were able to go on to college while they were still with us and attend college courses. They were working on information technology, and sometimes their computer science classes would get ahead of me, and I'd have to do some research on YouTube before I could help them with their coursework. We did outings regularly when they achieved certain goals as a community within the center, and we'd go to the beach and have fun at the beach. They love to make kites. They're very resourceful youth. They're great boys. They're very artistic. Once a week we would do an art session. Sometimes it was about what we learned earlier in that week. If we talked about relationships, an aspect of relationships, sometimes the art was focused on that. So in the bottom, on the, what would be your left side, is a few boys' arts about what it's like when they build positive relationships in life. So one boy is like it's this beam of color in the darkness. Another boy, a sun coming up over the mountains. Another boy, a bird taking care of its young ones. They like to have fun. They like to dress up. Because social work isn't all hard. There's the good moments too, right? And that's the same in the Philippines in Peace Corps. This art was their past and present and future hands. So they kind of put their past and present on one hand, and they put their future on the other hand, what they wanted, and they'd share at the end of session about what they drew. So even if you are struggling to learn the language, there's a lot of ways to still do things, even early on in your service, that can teach skills to boys, get them thinking, and also be a really good experience for them to express themselves. You get vacation time in the Peace Corps because for your mental health and the fact that you're living in another culture, you're usually isolated. You don't necessarily have a person from your batch living in the same town as you usually. You get to take vacation. So I showed some other scenes earlier, but this is rice fields before they're planted. This is rice fields up in a mountain that you literally have to hike into that village to see these rice fields. This is in a mountain community where they still bury their deceased on the sides of mountains for very specific reasons. Very indigenous but spiritual practice. This is the mosaic piece I based my last question of Peace Corps on. Made by a Filipina artist and part of a museum in one of these places that I was able to visit during my vacation time. Having the local language helped during vacation immensely. Of course, when you're traveling as a foreigner, people look at you differently, but if you can speak the language, it goes a long way. Some beautiful beach and mountain overlooks in the Philippines, too. And of course, I had to throw in some pictures of hand washing. You don't realize how much you appreciate a washer and dryer until you hand wash clothes for 2 years. It is hard work. I hugged a washer and dryer the first time I saw one after Peace Corps because I missed it that much. So it will be a forever remembrance for me not to complain on laundry day because it's really not that bad once you have hand washed. I used to complain all the time about laundry day in the States. Now I don't. Goodbyes. Goodbyes are hard at the end of your service. There are several of the staff I worked with, my counterpart and I. And my site mate lived an hour and a half away, this gentleman in the green shirt over here, and he also hung out with the boys on a monthly basis and got to know them and enjoyed the work there. So we had a goodbye picture with a lot of our boys before they got sweaty playing basketball. And so, next steps, questions. I put my contact info up there. You know, if you don't get your questions answered today by Shauna or I, you can always text me or email me. I still use my AgUmail because it's a Gmail account, and it's just great. I don't have to like worry about giving people my new email address, so familiar to you all. My biggest advice is find your passion, find your why for what you do in social work. If you do the Peace Corps, what's your passion, what's your why for doing it? Those things will take you so far in this field. Have your self-care, but knowing your passion, finding the work that really gets you excited is huge in taking care of yourself and enjoying the work we do. So yeah, now I'll let Shauna give a pitch and then we'll be open for questions.
I'm Shauna, and I'm here on behalf of the Peace Corps field recruiter, Miranda. Volunteer position. I actually served in the Peace Corps also as a youth development volunteer, but in Cameroon, which is in sub-Saharan West Africa, just right borders Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, in that area. And I served from 2011 to 2013, and then right after I'm originally from Maryland, and I needed some next steps, and Annalisa briefly mentioned AmeriCorps, so I joined up with AmeriCorps Vista and moved out here. That's what brought me out here to Utah, and I've been in Logan ever since, so going on 6 years. I worked at a local elementary school, and now I work up here on campus out of the Center for Persons with Disabilities, and I run the AmeriCorps Vista program that I came out to serve with 6 years ago. So that's kind of the track that I took and am on right now. I'm getting my master's at Penn State in Community and Economic Development. And I think a little bit of what Annalisa was talking about and kind of what I'm trying to get at is that there is no one way to get to where you want to go. You don't even have to know where you want to end up or where you want to be, but the path is yours, the journey is yours. You can make it what you want. I'm sure Annalisa had a hard time making that decision, you know, when she was doing social work for what probably seemed like a long time. And it was probably a really hard decision for her, but it's a decision she made that I'm sure she's happy with, and that probably changed the rest of her life, and how she will look at life and her professional and academic endeavors. So Peace Corps is a federal agency. It's an independent federal agency, so it is funded on federal dollars, and like Annalisa said, it's 27 months. It's a really great program because a lot of the programs she was talking about, those short-term programs, they come with program fees. They are short-term, which really you don't get that immersive experience. There's a lack of integration in the community, even though they serve their purpose and are great. But the Peace Corps, I mean, there's no program fee. It's the application, submit the applications, and then you go through the process she was talking about, and they will fly you to country. You get a living stipend when you're serving in country each month, depending on local income levels. So you're not making American money in country by any means. And you also are fully covered medically, so full dental and medical insurance at no charge, at no additional charge to you. And then they fly you back when you're done. You have professional development opportunities in service that are free to you. And when you get back from service, there are benefits to you professionally. In the federal sector especially, you have non-competitive eligibility, which kind of gives you a leg up in federal job positions for a year after, is that right? A year after. Grad school benefits. There's a program where when you come back, a lot of grad schools will look at your application and say, okay, you're a returned Peace Corps volunteer, we're going to offer you discounted tuition or an assistantship, free tuition, even in some cases, pending that you are accepted into that program. And then just the lifelong learning, soft skills, technical skills in your field, which I'm sure Annalisa feels that she has gained. But really the soft skills that employers are looking for, adaptability, perseverance, resourcefulness, those are really big skills that employers are looking for. And as someone who employs and hires people, I know we're always looking for those skills in people. And I would venture to say that you could not join and serve in the Peace Corps and not gain those skills. If you didn't, I don't know what you're doing. But yeah, so that's just my pitch. I love Peace Corps. It is the hardest job you will ever love. It is difficult, but the experiences, the development that you have personally and professionally they will change your life. And they might confirm the path that you thought you were going to go on, and they might not confirm that path, and you might change your path, and that's okay. So I would encourage everyone who's interested to go on the website, look into it. I have back on the back table, I have my iPad back there with a form that you fill out to get on the recruiter's like mailing list, basically, to get updates, and when she's coming up to campus, she'll send out email blasts and those kinds of things. So you're welcome to fill that out. I also put my card back there. Again, I'm based on campus, and I'm happy and love to meet with anyone who's interested in Peace Corps. I love talking about Peace Corps. I'm happy to go out to lunch with you, or we can just email or whatever, back and forth. I'm very happy to do that. Yeah. Are there any questions, though, about the application process, what Peace Corps is looking for, specific service questions for Annalisa? She got back really recently, so.
Yeah, it's important.
Do you need a bachelor's degree to do this, or you just start? Can you do it as an undergrad?
I think most positions within the Peace Corps need a bachelor's degree, if I remember correctly. There's a few where if you have a certain number of years of experience, but most of them you need a bachelor's degree, and I would say, and that's really for the purpose of having a skill set that you can go in and help your community from. You know, you're not going to go in and do it your way, you're going to learn how to do it their way. But if you have a skill set from a bachelor's degree of some sort, it gives you kind of that starting place, that base, that foundation to come from.
And I know, so when you go onto the Peace Corps website and look at the openings, it will say what the requirements are, and I would say a majority of them do require a bachelor's degree. The minimum requirements are 18 years of age or over and a U.S. citizen. They're the absolute minimum requirements. But like Annalisa said, in certain circumstances, if you have X amount of years of experience, then that can supplement, you know, just for a lot of other jobs, that can supplement a bachelor's degree. I know a lot of military who have a lot of military experience and not necessarily a degree will use that experience to join Peace Corps. So it just depends on the position, honestly. That's a good question, though. Yeah?
You mentioned before that, excuse me, that after you get back, you had like non-federal competitive something?
Non-competitive eligibility, yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so basically when you apply for a federal position, there are different levels during the process, and then different levels of which you can work in the federal government. So basically when you apply, say there are 10 people applying for this federal position, and you just got back from the Peace Corps, and you have non-competitive eligibility. When you submit that documentation, you will you'll kind of jump through a few of these hoops to get higher up on the list, to be contacted for an interview. Sometimes it will jump you up a level, like from a GS5 to a whatever level position. So it kind of just gives you a leg up in the pool of applicants. It is not by any means a guarantee that you'll get an interview. But the federal government is familiar with and is a strong employer of national and Peace Corps service, so AmeriCorps and Peace Corps service. So it kind of just gives you a leg up during the interview process. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think a lot of people know about non-competitive eligibility. If you start with AmeriCorps, you also get that status for a year after you serve. So, and there are also student loan benefits for while you're serving. You can have your loans deferred for while you're serving. And Peace Corps service counts for public service loan forgiveness, as long as that's a thing. will be because I'm trying to get it. Did you have another question though?
Yeah, I did. So you guys mentioned that like it helps you to find a passion, or like you should have a passion before you go out. Like I'm curious, like what was your motivation to go out and do it then? Like what were you looking for? Because I kind of want to get like a broad idea of like, well, I should start like future view, you know.
I think for me, it was nice that you can look up Peace Corps positions based on the work that's available. Because I knew I loved working with teenagers. I knew I loved that work here in the U.S. And so I was able to look at different countries that had the youth development sector and know that, at least in some regard, that's my passion here, and hopefully that transfers very well to a different country, working with youth in a different country. And so you don't have to have an extremely detailed passion or why, but having some sort of direction when you go into it, because it will be stressful in some of the experiences you face. So having some sort of passion kind of gives you this grounding, this root to go back to, that I think really helps you sustain through 27 months of service that requires a lot of you. Like she said, some people when they leave Peace Corps, they decide after doing that work for 27 months that they want to change their passion. You know, so going in, they have this passion in mind, but then they leave and they want to do something different, and that happens to several people. But you know, going in with some sort of passion in place, I think gives you a good grounding spot for yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like mine was probably a little broader because Annalisa had a lot of professional experience under her belt by the time she had applied. And I applied and left right after I finished my undergraduate degree. So I left 2 months after I graduated with my bachelor's. And my passion, I mean, I knew I liked coaching. I did coaching and tutoring, and I know I liked working with people, but it was more about empowering people than coaching specifically or those kinds of things. So, and then honestly for me, I wanted to go to Africa. I wanted to live in Africa. That was like, when I was in middle school, I was like, I would love to live in Africa. A friend of mine joined the Peace Corps. When I was a senior, she had just graduated college and went into the Peace Corps, and I was like, wow, that's a cool thing. So I knew I wanted to go to Africa and live with people and learn culture, learn another language, and Peace Corps was my way to do that. And then I kind of found a passion when I was serving in Peace Corps. And during service, when time got difficult, it was more of that, like, wow, okay, I'm here, like, I love this. This is so hard, but I love this. This is a beautiful place, beautiful people, and that kind of kept me going. There's no mold of what someone looks like, what someone has done before they go into the Peace Corps. Like that.
Your passion really could be wanting to live and work within.
Yeah, that could be it. Like that's if that's enough to drive you and enough to keep you satisfied and excited to serve, then that is what it will take. And that, yeah.
I will say, it's a different experience going in as an undergrad versus going in as someone who's experienced professional life. Even within my batch, there were some there from right out of their undergrad. There were some of us in there who had some years of experience, and there was even volunteers serving in their 60s in my batch. So, you know, there's no right time to apply other than it's the right time for yourself. Are you ready for that step? Are you ready for a job that is going to challenge you and push you? You're going to have some great growth and experiences from it, but it's going to challenge and push you, and you're going to have a lot of adjustment at first. So it's really about making sure it's the right time for yourself. There's no, you have to do it right after undergrad, or you have to get experience first after your undergrad. You know, it's about finding the time that really is best suited for your personality.
It's true. It's very true.
A question for Annalisa. What were some of the social differences in the Philippine culture apart from your American experience?
You know, I actually talked with my sector manager, and I said it's amazing to see how many similarities there are. I think, though, one of the biggest differences in social work here and then witnessing social work over there, because obviously I'm not doing therapy on these youth, I'm not licensed, nor the person culturally appropriate to do therapy with these youth. But I think the biggest difference was how mental health is viewed over there. They don't talk about it as openly as we do here in the U.S. So that was a big challenge at first, and learning to work with my counterpart. And by the end of my service, my counterpart and I would run weekly sessions with these boys that were more informational heavy, like learn about this, think about how it's been present in your lives, reflect, process, learn new skills for dealing differently. But by the end of my service, she and I were leading sessions with the boys once a week that focused on things like trauma and abuse, and really focused on maybe you've perpetuated sexual assault against someone. And what does that mean, and where does that come from in your life, and how do you move forward from that? And we had these deep conversations after building relationships, after working through some smaller stuff first. You know, obviously you're not jumping straight into those conversations right away, so we were building like a communication skills. How do we communicate assertively rather than aggressively? So there's a lot of similarities, but most of the differences were how open people are to talking about mental health over there, and working through that difference was something I couldn't have done without my counterpart. She was an amazing asset for me, and really wanted the youth to have that experience for therapeutic benefits from the program that they weren't getting. They don't have a licensed clinical social worker over there. The social workers are bachelor's level, you know, so we're not over there doing therapy, but we're teaching them about this is what is abuse, and sometimes people who have been abused and perpetuate on others, and how does that impact your life, and what do you do next? So yeah, learning to work within that mindset of we don't always talk about mental health here, and it's very uncomfortable, and we laugh it off and we move on, was the biggest challenge. And a lot of the other work was very similar, surprisingly, to the work I did here in the US. Just different language.
Did you have a question?
I did. What supports does the Peace Corps have in place for you when you face difficult times?
Yeah.
It sounds like you got a lot of support from your counterpart, but
Yeah, I can only speak to the Philippines post because I think every post operates a little differently. I had a great relationship with my counterpart. Actually, my first month at site was when the Vegas shooting happened, and I'm from Vegas, and I lost a friend during that shooting. And I'd been at site for literally 2.5 weeks, and I was like, just, you know, like, dealing with this, might seem a little distracted, sorry. And she's like, what do you need? Do you need to stay home? And I was like, no, then I'll be like checking Facebook all day, like, I want to go to work with you today and be distracted and do stuff, like, because checking Facebook is just going to make me more anxious. But I also had great relationships with the Peace Corps staff that I worked with on a regular basis. So youth development sector, I was very close to my sector-based staff. I could talk to them about struggles and say, I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of that. My sector manager, he knew because I was isolated. My closest site mate was an hour and a half away, whereas there were other people who literally had someone 30 minutes away. He knew if I submitted a vacation request that it was for my mental health to take vacation. He always really worked hard to help me get vacations approved for the time and the people I wanted to go with, because he knew that was me taking care of myself. We had that discussion, like, even though I'm an introvert, it's kind of hard to be an hour and a half away and be the only volunteer in my community, and people don't understand you the same as if you're another volunteer serving. So when I submitted vacation requests, it was very good to give me that time to take care of myself. Mental health services, at least in the Philippines post, there's not a lot of formal services. Therapy is starting to emerge in the Philippines, but like I said, it's not very common there. We had a regional therapist, but she worked with Thailand, Cambodia, Philippines, like all these different countries. She was based in Thailand. It was more like crisis counseling. So that's, I think, for me, where I had done my own therapy work before Peace Corps. I had experience. I came in a little older. I think that helped me a lot get through some of the tough times, but also having those close relationships with your other volunteers, with your counterparts, with your Peace Corps staff are really, I think, a main support, at least for Philippines Post, but I would guess for most posts.
Yeah, and to kind of continue that, I think of what Peace Corps volunteers going in will struggle with. They have to remember that, so the Peace Corps staff in country, only a certain number of them are allowed to be U.S. citizens. And then and it's a very small amount compared to the entire Peace Corps staff in that country. So what they do is they'll go, and maybe 3 staff of the 20 are U.S. citizens. The rest are host country nationals that have gone through a pretty serious job application to get these positions in medical positions, safety positions, program manager, training positions, those kinds of things. And I think what Peace Corps volunteers need to remember that, and they also have to trust their program staff. They've gone through a very competitive application process and are qualified. A lot of them have higher education degrees and a lot of experience in different cultures, not just in that culture of that country. So I think that's a big thing, just trusting your program staff. And another thing is the Peace Corps is pretty good about safety measures. They take them very seriously. It's always good to consult with your program manager, who is probably a host country national, and just ask, you know, okay, like, what's the crime like here? Like, what's common crime around here? How can I make sure, you know, to be vigilant, make sure that doesn't happen to me? How can Peace Corps help? And they will make sure that those safety measures are in place. If you go through a traumatic event, they will do what they can to bring you in, make sure you feel safe. They'll bring you in to like the central area where all the Peace Corps staff work, and there's we call it a cause, like a house, the Peace Corps house. I forget what you would call that in English, but and they'll bring you in and make sure you're safe. They'll assess the safety of your village or town, your house, you know, what the situation is like with your neighbors, etc. And same if there's a larger crisis going on in that country, if there's civil unrest in that country, Peace Corps is always great to evaluate those safety concerns. And when you come back from Peace Corps, you are guaranteed mental health services, medical services for a certain amount of months after you return. They're really trying to improve their services for mental health, because settling back into American culture is really overwhelming and exhausting, honestly, and there are just so many emotions going on. And so I feel like it's been in the past 5 years they've really tried to amp up their outreach and raising awareness for mental health services when Peace Corps volunteers come back. So that's what I would say about that. Yeah. And then
I've just got a question about, I know you guys made it clear that, you know, and obviously there's a difference between someone who goes directly after their college experience versus somebody who's worked professionally, and that there's not necessarily a right time, because you could go anytime. But are there things, since the majority of the audience today are undergraduates, are there things that either of you would recommend undergraduates could do now to sort of help decide, would the Peace Corps be something that's right for me? Like, are there experiences that they could have on a smaller level, or classes or areas of study that you might recommend that might help them sort of get a taste for some of the skills that are necessary for Peace Corps?
Yeah, honestly, I would say taking a language course is huge. I feel like I mean, you would obviously get practice in learning a second or third, how many ever languages. But you would also get some cultural experience, learning about the culture of another place, and you know, local dialects, those kinds of things, those kind of cultural things. And on the application, during the application process, Peace Corps weights second language, or you know, how many other language acquisition pretty heavily. So that's something that I would say is good for undergraduates to do. The other thing, at least in terms of the application, and to get you some experience in integrating into your community, Peace Corps, especially for applicants who are just coming out of college, they want to see experience being engaged in the community, volunteering in your community. And I'm talking off campus. Because to me, campus is like this place where everyone feels it's their comfort level, they're safe, they know what clubs are available to them, they know what activities are available to them. And to me, that's kind of like
It's a bubble.
It's a bubble, and that's like being in your house or wherever when you're serving in the Peace Corps. But Peace Corps, they want you to get out into your community and integrate and see where the assets are in your community, the needs are in your community, And so they want to see that kind of experience on a resume. So, I mean, volunteering with local nonprofits, even at local events consistently, as consistently as you can. I know you guys are all really busy.
I think those volunteer experiences too can also help you find a little bit more of that passion of
Yeah,
what you want
that's
to do
so
in the Peace
true.
Corps development, like the different sectors of development. Like if you're volunteering, with youth and you find you don't like it, then you know you're not going to pick a youth development sector job. Like you're going to figure something else out. If you love tutoring students, like an education sector job might be the right one for you. So I think that volunteering also helps you kind of find what fits for you on a personal level to do as your service in Peace Corps.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And USU has a really great Center for Community Engagement. There's a service center in there. It's the third floor of the TSC. And they run a lot of the student engagement programs out of that department. And some of them are based up here on campus. A lot of them are based out in the community. They range from intermittent like events or help here and there to part-time AmeriCorps positions that are 400 hours and you get an education award. We have this AmeriCorps Vista. That's a lot. It's 1 year of service and more hours. But your service center here and the Center for Community Engagement, they're really awesome. A lot of them have started their own nonprofits or run local nonprofits in the community. So this isn't like their only job here. So I would really suggest that you go there, because I would say volunteer experience is huge in prepping and just figuring out, like, do I want to do this? Like, it is a service. Am I interested in this kind of thing, or what am I interested in? And I think it would help students with that.
Yeah, I think on top of those two things, also reaching out to people who you know are PCVs, whether the recruiter is coming up and doing an event, sometimes our PCVs come to those events and share, and talking to them more one-on-one, asking them about specific challenges. Like, obviously I can't share it all with you today, right? Asking about specific challenges they faced, how did they overcome it, what was that like for them, asking about the successes, the growth that they experienced, and really kind of gauging, the challenges. Are they something that you would feel comfortable facing out of undergrad, or do you want to get more life experience? So I think that one-on-one conversation time with RPCVs is really helpful. I know before I applied, I met with several of the RPCVs in Salt Lake City and had like a dinner with them and chatted with them about what their experience was like in Peace Corps, and kind of heard, the hard and the good, not just how happy and good experience it can be, but also the hard stuff, and really made sure, like, mentally, was I ready for that? Because you are your own best gauge, and so asking about the challenges they faced, I think, can give you a good idea of, are you ready now, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, and that's why Annalisa gave you her contact information. That's why I want you to take my card and email me. I mean, there are no wrong questions. There are no awkward questions. It's another thing you learn in Peace Corps service. Nothing is awkward. You could be uncomfortable, but it doesn't matter. So there are no wrong or uncomfortable questions. The questions you have are valuable and will help you learn more about what service is like. And I'm sure Annalisa feels the same. I told you, I love talking about Peace Corps and would welcome any of the questions you have, or if you want to meet, or whatever you want to set up.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
With the foreign language, do you guys have like a class that you attend to learn more? How do you, like, I know you said you like fully immersed yourself, you were doing good by the end, but how do you get up to that?
So I know in the Philippines post, a lot of our initial training in the first 3 months is focused on language. And then also in the Philippines post, and I imagine they have this in other posts, they have like money that you can use to hire tutors, local tutors, to help you with the language. No one in my community wanted to tutor me because they were all too nervous about not having good English. So really it was like immersion. Like my host family was teaching me, the boys at work were teaching me. I was using like translation through different language books Peace Corps had given me. So there's different things that helped me, but like at least at our post, there was some sort of financial thing that you could avail of from the Peace Corps post to try and find a local tutor, because that employs someone in the community and also can help you learn it if you're one of those people who needs that more formal direction. I think that's a big push in the countries recently. I don't think that's always been there, but I know they were pushing us hard because it's part of our budget to use that service if we could find a tutor in the community.
Yeah, and language training in country, so she talked about the first 3 months of training. I mean, technical safety, language training is huge, like she said. And at least in Cameroon, we had a host country national who taught us. And then eventually we tested into novice, intermediate, and that also helped them decide where to place us in country. It was good in Cameroon because it's a bilingual country officially, dual language. And so if you were at the end of your 3 months and you were struggling to learn French, then there were options for you to be in a place where English, even though it was pidgin English, but English was the dominant language. Or, in a country that does only have to speak one language, or if it's tribal languages often, maybe if they find you're struggling, they'll put you in more of a city, a larger area where maybe there are more local people who know English or have gone to university and such. So they're pretty vigilant about that. And they take language acquisition pretty seriously because that's just a huge integration piece.
Yeah, I always felt much safer because I knew the language. I always felt much more part of the community.
Oh, yeah.
Because I knew the language, people, there was no hesitation in speaking to all of us. Yeah, I think it goes a long way. And Peace Corps really does want to help you find the ways to learn the language. Like I said, I'd never done it before. I tested at a level that was just one step below superior, which is considered like native fluency.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
And I was doing it all through immersion. Let alone if I had had a tutor, maybe it would have been even better.
Yeah.
So there's definitely resources there for language learning. Don't let that deter you. I was a little anxious about the language side of it going into it. Being older, it's harder to learn language when you're older. You're set in your ways, right? But they made it possible for me. They helped me find ways, and I think your community, a lot of communities, I think, take pride in helping their volunteers learn the language, because to them that's, yay, we taught her the language. My boys loved teaching me, and it was, it was fun. They wanted to learn English, I wanted to learn the language, so we taught each other, and it was very enjoyable. It wasn't any formal tutoring, but it was a very enjoyable process for both of us to be able to do that back and forth with the language.
Excellent. Well, I want to just take a moment to thank our speaker, Annalisa, as well as thank Shauna for her time. I'm sure if you guys still have additional questions or if you're too shy to ask them in front of the group, they've given you their contact information. They'll be here for a few minutes, so feel free to hang out. Feel free to grab any seconds or thirds, no judgments here, on your way out if anyone's still hungry. And thank you guys so much for coming today, and please join me in thanking our guests today.